Ever scrolled past Time Magazine's Person of the Year and thought, wait, that's supposed to be a good thing?
Yeah.
Like, are we celebrating this person or just acknowledging they were huge EE this year?
Right. It's an interesting question.
So today we're doing a deep dive on that very question. Is Time's Person of the Year a compliment or just about being really, really noteworthy?
It's a question that forces us to grapple with history and influence, you know?
For sure. And we're better to tap into the heart of that than the glorious mess of opinions that is Reddit.
Always a reliable source, right? This particular Reddit thread we found is gold.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
So it all starts with someone pointing out that Elon Musk, Time's 2021 Person of the Year, might not be bragging about that one so much these days.
I mean, can you blame him? Considering some of the other names on that list?
Exactly. The original poster basically threw some serious shade by listing out Musk's company in the Person of the Year Hall of Fame, Stalin, Hitler, even Ayatollah Khomeini.
Oof. Yeah, that's not exactly the most distinguished group.
And that single comment just blew the doors wide open. People were debating whether the award is about recognizing good people.
Or just whoever had the biggest impact, for better or worse.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that old saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Right, but does that hold true for something as prestigious as Person of the Year?
Good point. So what were people saying? Were they team good person or team big impact?
Oh, it was all over the map.
Shocking. Reddit, a diverse spectrum of opinions. Who would have thought?
Right. But seriously, it was fascinating to see the different perspectives. Some were adamant that it's all about impact, not necessarily sainthood.
Yeah.
They pointed to figures like Hitler or Stalin, arguing that their influence on the world, while horrific, was undeniable.
I mean, they're not wrong.
Right. And then you have those who seem almost disappointed with Time's choices, arguing that notoriety shouldn't be the only criteria.
Yeah, I get that. Like, shouldn't there be some consideration for positive contributions to the world?
Exactly. And there's this one comment that really stood out, comparing the impact of Osama bin Laden in 2001 to that year's actual winner, Rudy Giuliani.
Interesting, because if we're talking purely about impact, bin Laden completely dominated the news cycle that year.
Exactly. So it really makes you think, what's the true criteria here?
Right. Like, on the one hand, these figures, for better or worse, shaped history.
But then, is simply being infamous really worthy of such a title?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and that's the central tension that plays out in this thread. Some commenters wonder if Time magazine might be prioritizing sensationalism over genuinely positive contributions.
It's almost like they're wrestling with the very definition of what it means to be the person of the year.
Right, like what are we actually saying about someone when we give them this title?
Okay, so we've got some serious ethical dilemmas here.
Oh, absolutely.
But amidst all the serious debate, there's a recurring joke that we absolutely have to talk about.
Do tell.
It seems like everyone on Reddit was the person of the year back in 2000.
Ah, yes. The year Time magazine chose you, as in the individual user-generated content creator.
Oh, right. I remember that. I think people were scratching their heads a bit back then.
Absolutely. It was unprecedented. But looking back, it was a stroke of genius.
How so?
Well, it speaks volumes about the changing nature of influence, especially in the digital age.
That's true. It was kind of a precursor to the rise of social media and the idea that everyone has a platform.
Exactly. And it paved the way for Time to recognize other, less conventional people of the year in the future.
Okay, so we've established that this whole person of the year thing is a bit of a minefield.
To say the least.
But to really understand the weight of this debate, I think we need to zoom in on a specific person of the year.
Okay, I'm with you.
And the thread actually gives us a perfect case study. Mikhail Gorbachev.
Gorbachev, huh? The last leader of the Soviet Union.
The one and only.
Talk about a figure who still evokes passionate debate. Some might even say he's the poster child for this whole is it a good thing dilemma.
So how did the Reddit sphere weigh in on his legacy?
Buckle up, because opinions were all over the place with Gorbachev. So with Gorbachev, you see, it gets complicated.
Whoa, how so?
Well, some Redditors, let's just say, they didn't hold back.
Oh, they went there.
Oh yeah, they criticized Gorbachev's reforms, perestroika, and glasnost.
Right, those were his big things.
Right, and these Redditors saw them as leading to the downfall of the Soviet Union.
Wow, so they're basically blaming him for the collapse of a superpower.
Essentially, yeah. The criticism boils down to this view that by trying to reform the Soviet system...
Which, let's be real, probably needed some reforming.
Sure, but their point was that by trying to reform it, Gorbachev inadvertently hastened its demise.
So he's being judged not necessarily on his intentions, but on the ultimate outcome.
Precisely. And that outcome, the fall of the Soviet Union, is viewed by many as a negative event.
So in their eyes, he's lumped in with the Hitlers and Stalins of the world.
In a way, yes. Some users definitely put him in that category of less than celebrated winners.
Wow, that's harsh. But I imagine there were other viewpoints, too. It couldn't have been all negative, right?
You're absolutely right. It wasn't all doom and gloom. There was another side to the conversation.
Oh, there was.
Definitely. There was a whole contingent passionately defending Gorbachev's legacy.
Okay, so what were their arguments?
They were really trying to provide context,
Yeah, context is everything, isn't it?
Exactly. And they were emphasizing that Gorbachev inherited a system, how do I put this? A system riddled with issues.
To put it lightly.
Right, like it was arguably already on the verge of collapse when he took over.
So in their eyes, he was dealt a losing hand from the start.
That's the gist of it. They saw his attempts at reform, even though they ultimately failed to preserve the Soviet Union as well. Brave, even heroic.
So two completely opposite takes on the same guy. It's fascinating how a single Person of the Year title can be so polarizing.
It is, and it highlights this tendency we have to view history through our own lens, doesn't it?
Totally. It's less about Gorbachev himself and more about how people interpret the complexities of history and leadership.
100%. And there's another layer to this that the thread brought up that I thought was interesting.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, it's the fact that the dissolution of the USSR, while not Gorbachev's initial goal, was ultimately peaceful.
Right. It's easy to forget, looking back, how much fear and uncertainty surrounded the Cold War.
Absolutely. The potential for conflict was very real.
And with the Soviet Union having nukes, a peaceful outcome was not a guarantee.
Exactly. So even though Gorbachev has his critics, his actions did contribute to preventing a potentially catastrophic global event.
Which makes you wonder if, in his case, the Person of the Year title is less about Gorbachev the individual.
And more about acknowledging his role in a pivotal moment in history.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's a really insightful way to look at it.
It makes me think about the title less as a judgment on the person and more as like a historical marker.
Right, like a snapshot of a specific moment in time.
Yeah, and the person chosen is almost secondary to the events and anxieties of that year.
That's a really interesting point. And it brings us back to Elon Musk, actually.
Oh, how so?
Well, just like Gorbachev, he seems to represent a moment where public perception of a Person of the Year can dramatically shift.
And not just over decades, but within a relatively short period.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that the Reddit thread itself mirrors this evolution of public opinion about Musk.
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
So in the beginning, there's this overwhelming wave of admiration for Musk.
Right, the tech visionary, the real-life Tony Stark.
Exactly. Revolutionizing industries left and right. You can sense the genuine awe at his entrepreneurial spirit and technological breakthroughs.
It's true. There was a time when he could do no wrong. What were some of the comments like back then?
Oh, they were practically gushing over his work with Tesla and SpaceX.
Yeah, those were his crown jewels for a while.
Right, users were captivated by his ambition to revolutionize transportation and space travel.
He was the ultimate disruptor, at least in the tech world.
Exactly. But as we know, things have changed. The narrative around Musk has become much more, shall we say, complicated.
To put it mildly, at what point do you see that shift happening in the thread?
Well, the 2018 Thai cave rescue comes up quite a bit.
Oh, right. That whole thing with the mini submarine and the British diver.
Yeah, that one. A lot of users point to that incident, and specifically to Musk's reaction to criticism as a moment where his public image started to crack.
Yeah, it was like people got a glimpse behind the curtain and they didn't necessarily like what they saw.
Exactly. And unfortunately for Musk, it didn't stop there.
Oh no, it spiraled from there, didn't it?
Pretty much. From that point onward, the thread starts to express this growing unease with Musk's behavior.
Both online and offline.
Oh, absolutely. His increasingly erratic online presence, his political alignments, his management style at Tesla, it all comes under the microscope.
It's almost like with each passing year, a new layer gets peeled back.
Revealing a more complicated and to some concerning figure.
And suddenly, that Person of the Year title starts to feel a little less shiny, doesn't it?
Right. And this is where the parallels to those earlier, less than favorable recipients start to emerge.
People start to question if Musk might be more at home with that group than they initially thought.
Exactly. It's like the more we learn, the more we have to reevaluate our initial perceptions.
Wow. It's truly remarkable how quickly public opinion can change.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, is the person of the year really about who Time magazine chooses?
Or is it more about us, the collective we, who ultimately decide how those choices are viewed over time?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Ah.
And I think it gets to the heart of why this topic is so endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, it really makes you think, is time in control of the narrative, or are they just along for the ride like the rest of us?
It's like they throw this grenade of a question out there every year.
Who is the person?
Exactly. And then they just step back and let the court of public opinion hash it out.
Sometimes for decades to come.
Right. It's like the conversation never really ends. It just keeps evolving.
It's true, every generation probably has their own take on these figures.
And what's so fascinating to me is that the person of the year selection almost becomes a time capsule itself.
What do you mean?
Well, it's not just about the person who's chosen, right?
Right.
It's about what that choice reveals about the world at that specific moment.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like it captures the anxieties, the values, even the blind spots of a particular year. So looking back at past winners is like getting a glimpse into the zeitgeist of that year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a pretty uncomfortable glimpse, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like Hitler in 1938. Talk about a controversial choice.
It's easy to look back now and be horrified. But at the time, Hitler's rise to power was a global event.
I mean, you can't deny his influence, as terrifying as it was.
Exactly. And Time magazine, even back then, recognized him as a force to be reckoned with.
What did they even say about him back then?
Well, their own article from '38 called him the greatest threatening force facing the democratic world.
So even then, they knew he was dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. But the point is, his selection, whether we like it or not, reflects the fear and uncertainty of the pre-war years.
The looming threat of fascism, yeah.
Exactly. It's a chilling reminder that influence doesn't always equate to positive change, and that even back then, Time was grappling with that very question,
It's almost like Time magazine is holding up a mirror to society each year,
showing us the good, the bad, and the ugly.
forcing us to confront both the triumphs and the terrors of our times.
And isn't that what makes this topic so endlessly fascinating? It's not about easy answers or clear-cut heroes and villains,
It's about grappling with the complexities of history, the nuances of influence.
and the messy, messy reality of human nature.
Well said. So after all this, after dissecting historical figures and wading through the passionate opinions of countless Redditors, have we finally arrived at the answer? Is Time Magazine's Person of the Year a compliment or a burden?
You know, if we're being honest with ourselves, if we consider all the nuances we've uncovered today, I don't think there's a simple yes or no answer.
And maybe that's okay.
Maybe that's the point.
It's a question that will continue to spark debate, make us question our assumptions about influence, legacy, the very nature of what it means to make a mark on the world.
And on that note, instead of offering a definitive answer, we're going to leave you with a question to ponder.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Hit us with it.
Does the Person of the Year selection say more about the person chosen or about the state of the world during that specific year?
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that. Think about the winners you find most inspiring, most controversial, or even just the ones that make you scratch your head.
What does their selection reveal about the hopes, fears, and values of that time?
And what does it say about us for making that choice?
Food for thought.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next thread.